it is very weird to think of why is it important for youth work, because for those of us that have always been involved in youth work, it's kind of common sense that it is important. Because for many of us, it's like the beginning of our journey, where we start making our own decisions. And if we're involved in like youth groups and stuff like that, it really, at least it helped me a lot when I was much younger. Um, and just the other day, I kind of rediscovered that I've been part of youth groups since I was 13, um, which some people have started much earlier, but I myself started like around 13, 14. And if I look back, my childhood was so much better because I had that group of people that I had some things in common with, especially for those of us that school was probably a bit difficult. Church youth group can be a big help. It gives you like a second home, especially for those of us that maybe our home wasn't the safest of places, or at least we use it as an escape, or it was just an add-on of positive individuals in our life if everything was quote unquote perfect. So youth work is important. It's just the way it is. Right now, I think one of the reasons why the church is kind of entering this weird crisis of not having clergy, much of it was because of our own way of dealing with young people back then. And now we're encountering all of these bunch of retirements, and there's not enough people to take care of our churches. And it's not because we're not a good church, we're a wonderful church. But we need to take care of all aspects of all of the generations. And the youth work, especially the young adults, at this point are being really, really ignored. The one toxic expression that I hear a lot, and I think is a toxic expression in almost every diocese, is we've always done it that way. We've always done it that way. Usually when it's used, it is used because someone feels that something should not change. It is not used when we're talking about things that we really appreciate and love and want to keep. So the expression can go either way. We've always done it that way. There's a lot of wonderful things that we do still that we should keep on doing, but it doesn't mean that we should erase everything else that might be different or might express something else. So it's always good to keep that. I think I should print it as a shirt and bring it to General Convention this year. See if somebody throws me a chair. So yes, youth work is important. If I'm not mistaken, if we don't change our youth, our way of seeing youth ministry, the church will find itself really, really hungry for people, and everything else just keeps getting affected. And I think that the fights that a lot of politics are being mixed with our way of thinking these days, and when we think differently, we automatically push people away. And this whole generation thing of naming generations is sometimes useful and sometimes can be not useful, because people put labels on others, and sometimes labels kind of help with the separation part. It does help, but it does separate too. So the one question that I always ask myself is, if you kind of understand, even if it's a little bit, that youth work is important, then what's next? And I believe that what's next is, what are the needs of the youth, specifically to where you are? Because we tend to treat youth work as the same. And I know that when I was in youth work at my age, our youth of our parish had very different needs, because we were in an area that nobody went hungry in that area. Parents had both jobs, and we went to good schools. We had a certain amount of privilege, and this is back in the island. And I'm grateful for having been provided a really good education. Now, if I go down the road to another parish that serves people in a different neighborhood, if you're going to start a youth group there, you have different needs with those kids. Those kids down there might be missing a meal here and there, might have trouble buying their uniforms, might be going to different schools. Maybe the schools might not be the safest ones. So if you put like one mold and then you keep on photocopying the same thing in every church, it's going to fail somewhere if you don't adjust accordingly. So one of the first things I did when I arrived in this position was to listen. And then it was in the middle of the pandemic, so it was easy to do Zoom meetings. Easy and at the same time not, because people were zoomed out, including myself. So it was pretty much about asking questions like, hey, so what's going on in your neighborhood? You know, and we have a neighborhood here in our diocese that there's a really big suicide epidemic. And I know they lost multiple people in just 1 month. Multiple youth. These are wonderful young souls that we lost. And you know, how do you deal with that in your own town, in your own way? And then I listened to other churches that, you know, just because a church has money doesn't mean they're successful in youth work either. You know, we all have issues with it because we just don't know what to do. So it is said, hey, okay, you have the funds, perfect. But what are the needs of your kids? Because even kids that might be going to really good schools doesn't mean everything is perfect in their life. You know, and what about, do you have a university close to you? Do you know what are the needs of the college students in that university? Do you have a food pantry that is probably created for youth, for young people? You know, what do you have? And then the little churches that I always, that I absolutely love, because they have a lot of fire, they just don't know they have it. And some of these little churches, they say, oh, well, we have no youth. But you sit in front of the churches for a couple of hours and you'll see a bunch of youth pass by. And it's like, okay, so have you gone into the town? Have you asked, hey, what are the needs in this town? What's going on? Where, you know, there's always kids. And it might not be the expression of serving them inside of the church. You might want to create something that you serve the church, the kids outside of the church. You know, getting out of the building is not a bad thing. And your youth group, it is the same thing on the street as it is inside of the building, with a nice activity and drawings and a little bit of worship. You can do that on the street too. But how do you know that that's the expression in your specific place? You have to ask questions. You have to analyze. You have to meet with the people. Sometimes you have to meet with the grandparents. Hey, how are your grandkids? Grandparents will tell you if there's a struggle with the grandkids. I mean, grandparents are wonderful. They're magical when it comes to this. Ask them, what's going on? See, but then we have the disconnect that, you know, the older people feel that they're useless when it comes to youth. Where like, I'm old, I have nothing to offer. I'm like, yes, you do. You know, and I know in camp I have this position called camp grandmas and grandpas, and it's pretty much older folk that are volunteering there has a presence, and sometimes the kids feel more comfortable going to them than maybe going to me as a director, or maybe more comfortable to them than going to a chaplain, because the collar scares people off sometimes. So if you give all these options, like a whole nice menu, someone is always going to find something they're going to like. It's the same thing with youth work. If you create all of these different ideas, and I know, Alan, you have a big project ahead of you, but I know it's going to be overwhelming some days. You're going to go like, oh my God, but it's fun. So if you create these options and these descriptions, and then whenever someone finds their flavor, and then they start developing that flavor, it becomes so much fun. But it has to start with asking ourselves the question, who are we? What do we want? And what are the needs of our own community? And then after you know what are the needs of the community, then you have to come up with, okay, what are we going to do? Depending on the needs. So if your needs is that you're a big church and then you have tons of money, like some churches do, but you have no youth, then look around you. Do you have a university around? What is it missing in the diocese? Is it LGBT ministry? Is it homeless ministry? Is it student uh, um, hungry students, or maybe students from different countries? What is it? Or look for someone, even the Lutheran Church. Like, are they doing something around for people that are in communion? Like, hey, participate with them, talk to them. Hey, what are you doing? What are you guys doing? Can I partner with you? Or create your own chapter or something. There's always something that we can do, and then organize accordingly. If you can afford a leader, having someone that is there, put them as a priority. I always find very interesting that many of our churches have a rector and then have an associate priest. And then the associate priest takes care of the youth inside of the church. But I never see someone that is walking outside of the church and doing things outside, like university ministry or street ministry. It is always within the compound that we have. It's almost like we need to kind of embrace the whole diaconal spirit of going outside and seeing what are the needs and bring them in and see, hey, we have this. Should we use it for the outside? And in that way, you're not really knocking on doors necessarily. You're giving people food that are hungry. And if one day they do decide, you know what, I really need a church home, you might be the first one that they're going to think about. Now, the reason why you gave them food is not because you want them in your pews, is because they were hungry. Period. So there comes the other toxic expression that I should make a shirt out of, which is, we need butt in our pews. We need butts in our pews. I think if I hear that one more time, I'm gonna have a fit. And it's usually from from older folk that don't have youth in their churches. We need more young people in our pews. My question to you is, for what? What exactly do you think is going to happen if 100 young people come into your church on Sunday morning at your service at 10:30? What are you going to do? PCP is beautiful. That's great. But what do you have to offer? Coffee and biscuits? If we ask ourselves that question, it's like, oh, shoot, I haven't thought about that. Then you should. If you think about those things and you have something to offer, then good. And it's not that it's a store where you go buy a product. But these days, kids have options. We all have options. I sometimes question myself, of all the options in the careers that I've had, this is the one that I want to do. I'm like, are you serious, Angel? You could have been so many other things. Because the work is frustrating. But it's beautiful. I absolutely love this work. I mean, I really don't want to do anything else. It's about doing what is in your heart. So if you as a church think, hey, this space is wonderful for young people, then you have to analyze all of the aspects. If the young people arrive on a Sunday morning, are the ushers nice? I don't know how many churches I've visited, not in this diocese, but in other dioceses, where the first phrase that I see has an usher is a grumpy person that can care less. I'm there. That's the first person that represents your church, the usher. Then you sometimes have the indifferent clergy person that can care less you're there. And then you try to choose a pew and you might choose the wrong pew. So you already get weird looks from someone because they've been sitting in the same pew for the past 150 years. There's always something. So if you want young people to be in your church, you have to offer something. And I'm not saying a product, but you have to offer a friendly smile. You have to be friendly. You have to be genuine. It doesn't have to be the most beautiful church in the world. It doesn't have to be the best sermon in the world. But if the first thing they see when they come to your church is a smile and a bunch of, yes, maybe older folk, Like some people like to tell me, maybe a bunch of older white people, which, so what? It's a bunch of very nice, sweet, smiling, welcoming older white people, or not. But it's a wonderful thing of feeling welcomed when you come. That person might come back. And that's how it begins sometimes. But sometimes some people are not going to show up on Sunday. So if you, let's say you have a youth group or a youth day, or maybe you go to, I know some clergy do this, they go to a famous coffee shop in town, and they put on Facebook, hey, come talk to me. I'm in this coffee shop. It's wonderful youth work. I know that doing things in breweries is quite wonderful, especially those that serve things that are alcoholic and non-alcoholic, of course. Meeting people in restaurants, that works. Starting a pantry that is for young people and putting signs in the university. There's one of our parishes that started putting signs in front of their churches that says welcome students. If you're in need, let us know. You're not telling them, hey, come to service. They don't want to come to service. They don't know you. There's something personal about Sunday morning that if I don't see friendliness, I'm not gonna put myself in that vulnerable position to come on Sunday morning. So there's different ways of starting youth work. But again, we need to go back and we need to listen, and we need to know what it is that we want. And we need to know why is it that we want to do it. We want to do it because we want to serve the community. If your priority is to serve the young people, the youth, the little ones, especially the young adults, which will bring the little ones because they are the young families. Makes sense, huh? If you do both, right? Because everyone wants the youth, but nobody thinks, hey, there's a single mother there that has a kid or two that might need some assistance, or a single father that has a kid or two that might need some assistance. That's a young adult. That's a 30-year-old, that's a 34-year-old, that's a 35-year-old. You got to take care of the young adults. They will bring the families, but you have to offer them a friendly and loving place. And we haven't done that in years. Many of the churches, which is the reason why everyone is of the same age. I mean, think about it. Like, what did you all do for the young adults? Nothing. That's why they went to college, and they probably don't even go to church anymore. And if they do, they came back to the same town, but they're not coming to you because you have nothing to offer them, and you probably were not very nice in the first place. Ta-da! And then we go to some other maybe denomination that is more colorful in terms of their service, and we get excited and we go there. And sometimes that doesn't even work, and we just never go back to church again. Like, I know that some mega churches around this town are having that problem now, that the expiration time for some of their youth is 2 years. They're 2 years, they have 2 wonderful years, and then there's nothing more about theology. There's no solid ground. It's just nice lights and pretty sermons in jeans and t-shirt. And all of a sudden the kids are just kind of like, because then life comes in, then bills starts coming in, then grades start coming in, or family death, or the struggle comes in, and you don't know how to deal with that because that hasn't been taught to you. And I think that the Episcopal Church can offer that. But how do we know we can offer that if we don't know who our community is? Or we don't even know who we are. So every parish needs to know who they are and who they serve and why they want to do it, and do it and have fun doing it. Youth work doesn't have to be complicated. It really doesn't. Ash Wednesday, you know what I did? This was really a lot of fun. I went with a bunch of other denominations. It was a Lutheran pastor, a UCC pastor, a Roman Catholic pastor, and me. We all got dressed however we dress. If you're a priest, if you're a brother, if you're a deacon, you're whatever. And we brought ashes, and we put some cute little cheap signs. We all had the same container of ashes. Mine was glass because I'm fancy like that. And we all just standing in the middle of the university. We weren't there screaming. Jesus loves you. No, let them see Jesus through you. Period. Don't know that you're a Christian. Don't know that you follow Jesus, but let it happen because of your actions, not necessarily because you're screaming at them. You know Jesus loves you, right? It just doesn't work. So we stand in there and we did ashes, and we were there for a couple of hours, and I remember us having lines of people, and all of these kids come from very different denominations, different ages, different countries, different ways of seeing faith. Some of them don't even know what it is that what they believe, but they know that there's something holy and wonderful about ashes. So they want to approach you because you're in the middle of the university, you're there, you're smiling, and they probably need some prayer, or they're probably thinking about, where should I go? Where do I belong? What am I doing here? All these things that pop into our heads when we're in college and we're in that young age of, and life is hitting us in the face and the world is going crazy and we're living a pandemic. We probably lost, I don't know how many family members because of the pandemic. The cost of going to college, which is so much for some, but we're there. And we did ashes and we prayed. We didn't ask what denomination they were in. We just said, hey, you want ashes? Is there something that you would like for me to pray for you today? That's it. There was no card, hey, I'm over there in that church. No. If you want to, that's fine. But it's not about the propaganda. It's about being there for the students. And they will remember you because you were there just to give a service without wanting something in return. Let Jesus take care of that part. Or put a little sign that says, hey, I'm from St. John's. Whatever city you're in. Or a little hashtag of Instagram or something. If you want to. There's nothing bad with that. Give a little bitty card. Something simple that they can put in their pocket privately. Not, the big pamphlet with instructions of how you're going to go to hell. Because it happens. Churches do that. I don't know why. So it's just being there. So it's about listening. It's about getting to know the community. It's about getting together and going over these generational lines and understanding that every generation is important in youth work and young adult work, and just loving everyone for who they are. And if one church is different and the other one's different, that's okay. That is how youth work should be. And we should not just try to be photocopies. But youth work is important. If we don't do youth work, we like to talk about the churches going down, the churches getting smaller. I don't really think it's getting smaller. But it can if we don't take care of everyone, not just those that are keeping the lights on inside of the congregation. So, and that's a difficult thing to say and to understand, but it's possible and it's fun. And, the older generation needs to understand that they are so important to many of these kids, because many of these kids don't have grandparents. There's kids that didn't have that sweet aunt or that sweet uncle or that grandma or that grandpa or that person to give them some good advice. So like every generation from the youngest to the oldest is important in this equation. And that's something that older people need to understand. We need you too. You're part of this. You're not just there, but they need to be a part of it. And they need to put this as a priority. And the diocese needs to put this as a priority. If it's not put as a priority, it's like, it's like a restaurant that looks very beautiful, but the food is just, no. Change the menu. People are going to get to know you, even if you're a hole in the wall, because the food is delicious. We need to be like that. We need to be that safe, wonderful, delicious space for people to go to. So that is, in a nutshell, how I see youth work, and this is a mix from many different parishes in my diocese. My diocese is the second largest in the Episcopal Church in terms of land. It's 154,000 miles. So we're very spread. We have 50-something parishes, and they're just everywhere. And they're hours from each other, so it's very difficult. So, even our bishop has a camper in the back of his truck. And sometimes the churches are so far from each other that sometimes he stays in his own camper in the parking lot of the churches. Isn't that wonderful? I think it's great. One day I was going north and he was going to another, and I saw him in the highway. I'm going this way to visit a church and he's going that way, and I recognize it because he has a little bishop's seal in the back of the camper, which I think is absolutely adorable. I'm like, oh my god, that is so cool. I should have the diocesan seal in the back. I'm like, youth work, but that's the way it is. We go. It doesn't matter where it is. If it's far, we figure it out, and you get it done however it is. I have a cot. I'm a big guy. I'm like 6'3", so I have a cot, a very extra large one. And if I need to stay in the church because there's an activity or something, I put a cot and I stay in the parish hall. That's me. That's me. Everyone's different. Everyone's different. You got to do what you got to do. And when it comes to youth work, you do it, and you're there for the kids, even if it is putting a sign in the middle of the university that says, "Hey, I'm here to talk," and sit down and see if any students want to talk and make a difference. Youth work is just like that. It's not that complicated. I think sometimes going back to the root of where some of the people that are on the pew started, many of them will tell you that they started at camp. Many, that camp is always crucial in many dioceses, especially this one. Oh my God, camp here is incredible.
That's awesome. We got rid of our camp a few years ago, so
and that happens too because they're expensive.
Yeah, we partner with South Dakota now. So
very nice. Yeah. I know we have one or two dioceses that that come over and stay at our camp, which is always awesome. Yeah. Even our bishop was a camp here once, 50-something years ago. I think his secretary was a counselor. It seems to me like even the bishop, one of the bishops in Texas was a counselor here. I'm like, what's happening here? I'm like, it's a lot to take over. You know what I'm saying? It's a lot of responsibility. I believe that the churches need to sit down just like we do with the vestry. Just like we need to discuss, hey, the organ's malfunctioning, or hey, we need a new clergy person, or we meet for budgets, or the same way we meet for altar guild, or for all of these incredibly important things that are part of who we are, right? Part of our identity. Is just to sit down with whoever's interested, of every age, and say, hey, let's sit down and see, how can we do youth work? And depending on the church, depending on the resources of the church. And I'm not talking about just what we have in the bank. Sometimes the resources is really connections within the congregation, because sometimes we don't know who we have on the pews and who's connected with what. Like I know that before this job, I was working in recovery with people that were recovering from opiate addiction and alcohol, and I was doing work with homeless. So we started work with youth that were homeless. Young people that are going to university, but live in their car. That's a way of starting something, even though that's a lot for a beginning ministry, but it always starts with a conversation. And then them talking about, hey, what are the needs in the community? And usually a congregation, the people are spread around. So you're going to get needs and different things that people hear and that read in newspapers or see on the news of the needs that are on the town about young people. And if you bring all of those details into one meeting, then you get to know, hey, so maybe we can participate with. And I know some churches, they get together, like there's small churches, like 3 of them, and they're kind of a couple of miles from each other. I know that there's a town here called Las Cruces, and there's 2 very healthy parishes, and they're getting together to do university ministry. And you know how they're starting? They're not starting with a youth house or nothing fancy. Both clergy are talking about it. I'm in the middle, helping to see what resources I can provide without being in the middle or telling them what to do. I'm just there to help, to guide, right? To inspire and to support. And they're getting together and they're gonna be a presence in the middle of the university to see and talk to the kids. Hey, so what are y'all's needs? What's going on? What can we provide for you? What is it that we might be doing wrong? And that's how they're going to start. And depending on the reaction and how all of this is happening, then they're going to put signs in front of their churches. And I think they've decided to start, if I'm not mistaken, is like a food pantry type of thing, but dedicated to like students that might have some need. And I mean, that's wonderful. I know that I ate sometimes because some of the churches were generous, other than the ramen noodles that I had for college. And I was in culinary school, thank God that we had food in the classroom. But on the weekends, I was a bit hungry and I did not want to eat ramen noodles. So, churches help, and that's something that stays with you. It's like, oh, I remember that little bitty church in the corner. They gave me food when I was hungry. That's something that you never forget. Your heart always will remember something as beautiful as that because they gave you food. And sometimes the little churches can start that way, or unite with other congregations and build a relationship. Or some I know have started with doing like a Bible study. And I don't like to call it Bible study because even though I love Bible study, sometimes Bible study for certain kids that are not too churched, it's almost like an allergic reaction. Which is really it's the fault of how we've done things in the past, unfortunately. It doesn't mean we need to stop it. It just means we need to modify it and make sure that that those wounds heal and we keep on doing it well. I know that here in downtown, they've started with what they call a rainbow Bible study. That might not be for every town, of course, but they started with a simple rainbow Bible study where what they're actually studying is all of those quotes that have been used against a certain people. That's what they're discussing. And at first, when I thought, I'm like, oh my God, that's going to be explosive. And you know what? I went there with a little bit of fear, and it was great. And now I want to be a part of it, which is kind of weird because I'm a diocesan employee, but it's so much fun. And I go whenever I get a chance. And, it's a safe, brave, beautiful space where a little bit of discussion happens, and then they have a little dinner. Anything that you do around a meal, even if the discussion wasn't the best, there is a connection there when you have a meal with someone that is just beautiful. And for some students or young people, that might be the only hot meal they'll get in half a week. So that's also significant. You might probably didn't inspire them by the discussion on Leviticus, but you got something warm in their tummy, and they're gonna remember that. And it might not be their space. There might not be LGBT. You might just need to do a regular, good old Bible study where the theme of the Bible study has to do with specific youth issues. Like I know that Black Lives Matter, we did a Bible study on Black Lives Matter when I was in Florida. And a lot of people were skeptic because Black Lives Matter and all of these subjects can be explosive. And we are taught that we don't talk about politics and religion, which I completely disagree. I absolutely love talking about politics and religion. But this is the thing. I love you, and I need to know that you love me. And we're going to discuss it from that standpoint. And I'm going to respect your opinion, and you're going to respect mine. And we're going to eat in the same table. It's a very Episcopalian thing. So I don't think we should have any fear of doing that. And you should have a good moderator when you have those conversations. And I remember that conversation we had about a minimum of 20 people in every single conversation. There was a point where we had 40. We even have people from all different dioceses that all of a sudden joined, even clergy. One time I think a bishop showed up. And they were very raw conversations, and they were beautiful. Why? Because love was at the center. And I know it sounds kind of cheesy, but if love is there, then Jesus shows up, the conversation goes well. That can also be a way of starting youth work, giving people space to discuss subjects that they're probably afraid of discussing in their own circles. And people get surprised when the church decides to speak about these things because we are guilty of making those subjects a taboo. And that's not good. We need to fix that. just like Jesus. He was pretty scandalous with his behavior. If we read the Bible, Jesus was not just this calm guy. He was always forming issues. He's like, everyone's so calm. I wonder what I should say to kind of put a little fire under them. I'm like, oh, Jesus, really? So you got to do the same. In peace and take the temperature and be careful and, be safe and try not to offend anybody. But at the same time, we need to push it sometimes in a good way, in a gentle and a loving way, and remind ourselves why we're doing it. Last thing I was saying was we need to look for the wounds that are there, and especially the ones that have been festering for many years. And that sounds terrible, but it's true. We need to look at the root, because sometimes those wounds are what's keeping some of the older folk away. Because nobody wants to add any drama or something like that. But we need to talk about healing and how we can work with it, and it's really about loving. We have to learn people's stories. We have to learn, and everyone's influenced by their own stories. I have my own, you have your own, Heidi has her own, and that influences who we are. And we need to do the same thing with the churches. The churches have their own personalities, and we need to figure out who are they, and depending on who they are, then we approach youth work. And it works beautifully when the parish knows who they are, and they know their capabilities and their limits, if there is any. Because I think with God, there's really not many limits. We just put them there. Is looking for it, and then when you find out something, then you start small, and with a little bit of support from you, Alan, and it's just really inspiring the churches to move forward and to do it. And sometimes there's kids in the pews, and sometimes it starts with 2 or 3, or sometimes it starts with just one young person. I've seen some of the healthiest youth groups started by just one person that said, hey, youth work is important. Can we all sit and talk about this? And then all of a sudden you have it. But again, it's one of those things that you put a seed, but you might not enjoy the fruit yourself, maybe. Or you might, just not the best fruit yet. But at least the tree's there. It's something that we just have to keep on going, because we're not going to be in these ministries forever. And like my responsibility as the missioner, and Alan, your responsibility there as a youth coordinator, is to make sure that we tend that soil, make it healthy and ready to plant, and make sure that nothing is impeding that growth. And then give that little farm to the next person. And it's the same thing with every church, especially the small, tiny ones that think that they are powerless. They're not. They have equal fire has the big ones. It's just a different fire. And sometimes they're even more effective in inspiring their own areas than some of the big ones too. We all have our benefits. You know what I'm saying? We all have our things. We just need to discover it. It takes time.